I'm Juliette Birch, and I am the shorts programmer for Filmfest DC. And today we have 4 filmmakers from our MetroShorts program, which is available to view on our virtual platform from the opening night of our festival on October 2nd through October 6th. In MetroShorts, we highlight the work of filmmakers from the Metro Washington area. And from its inception, this program was a big hit, not only as an opportunity for festival attendees to see the talent in their own city, but also a great opportunity for filmmakers to connect with each other. So this time around, usually after our Q&A, we head to the pub around the corner to have a little after party, and we won't be able to do that this time, but we will be able to be together for a great conversation about short film. So to introduce our guests, I wanted to say, we've separated the MetroShorts interviews. We have 7 filmmakers in total. We've separated it into 2 recordings so that we can have a little more time with all of our filmmakers since time is limited. And so today we have with us Dewey Ortiz, whose film is The Runaways, Mark Hoelscher, whose film is The Light in Provence, and Julia Hoppock, whose film is Alex's Biggest Race. Thank you all for being with us.
Happy to be here.
Thanks for having us.
So I thought I'd open by just asking you all to answer a question, and then I'll have some questions for each of you. If you could just each tell us briefly how you came to tell your story, and why don't we begin with Dewey?
Well, particularly with The Runaways, it kind of just came to me. You know, I get a lot of my inspiration from music, and so like other past projects and future projects, I was listening to a song, and the idea came to me about 2 teenagers in love looking to escape a domestic abuse situation where the guy was the protector of the girl, though they weren't living in the same household. And that's initially how it started, and then over time it evolved several different drafts, and eventually came to The Runaways, which everyone is viewing. And in general, you know, just telling films, I've been wanting to be a filmmaker since 16, and so it's just been a gradual process over time, learning, educating myself, and then eventually making films, which has led to where I am now.
Thank you. And Julia, tell us how you came to your story.
Sure, yeah. So I came to my story, Alex's Biggest Race, actually through my brother. So I had been doing film production with the Pew Charitable Trust for many years, and had always kind of wanted to find a story I could tell on my own, and was waiting for that right moment. And it came at Christmas, just with my family. And my brother was telling me that unfortunately his best friend Alex was diagnosed with stage 4 brain cancer, which I had known previously, but that, you know, the diagnosis had inspired him to bring back his high school swim relay team after 20 years of not having swum together, to do one more race together, just because swimming had meant so much to him in his treatment and throughout his life. And so yeah, so I just kind of heard about it at Christmas, and I was like, that's a great story. And not only, you know, would it help me scratch the itch to tell my own personal story, but also this would be very meaningful, you know, for my brother and for Alex's family. And so I just thought, why not? I should go to the swim meet and then figure out how to shoot this and tell a story. So yeah, just kind of went from there.
Thank you. And Mark, how did you come to your story, The Light of Provence?
It was a story that I've been thinking about for a long time. I first read about the phenomenon of the titular light in Provence in college, reading a textbook in one of my art history classes. And it was something that, you know, was in the back of my brain for a long time. And when I eventually determined that it was a good idea, something I really wanted to make, I spent a period of time trying to raise funds and put together a crew. And then after a long time of sort of starts and stops and it not going the way I wanted, I said, I'm just going to do it myself. And flew to France, saved some money, and flew to France by myself to make it. So it was
incredible.
Just, you know, it was sort of a mix of lots of research and then also sort of spontaneous. I'm gonna go and do it.
Just do it.
Yeah.
A la Nike. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Dewey, I wanted to ask you if you could tell us more about your relationship to this subject matter. So this film is about domestic violence, and you've done a web series as well about survivors of domestic violence. Obviously, you know, this is a really deep subject for you. So tell us more about your personal relationship to that.
Sure. You know, I have a personal relationship with domestic abuse, having witnessed it at an early age. And it was something that stuck with me. And without realizing it, manifested its way into the relationships I formed. And it manifested its way in a way that I wasn't keenly aware of until maybe a few years ago when I started talking to a therapist about it. But in the process of making the Runaways, I got inspired by a story. I think it was much a way to break down the events I witnessed as a child and use it as a form of therapy. And so it took about 3.5 years to make the Runaways. You know, you had to raise money, find the cast, raise more money, raise even more money. And so in the process of that, I wanted to kind of keep it going. I didn't want there to be a lull period. And so I created Survivor Stories, which was the docuseries. Really quick and easy to shoot. It was kind of a perfect storm. I had worked with domestic violence organizations previously to authenticate the Runaway story. So I already had a lining with them. At the time I had a green room, I had cameras, I had everything at my disposal. And so really it was just about organizing everybody on a day and bringing them up and telling their story. It was really, I think the key part about that was the phone conversations that happened before the interviews, where I was talking to these women, ensuring them that I had their best interest in heart. They told their conversations. Each phone call was maybe about 2.5 hours. I'm furiously taking notes because I'm going to craft questions. And I really got embedded with that community and learned that in some way, shape, or form, everyone has been touched by domestic abuse. You know, it may be your next door neighbors and their child may act out. You don't know why they're acting out, but you might later learn this is the reason why.
Yeah.
So it was all of these things kind of coming together and why it's so personal to me, and why it took such care in crafting the stories.
And it's very powerful that you really could see yourself experiencing a therapeutic process over these 3 years. So your relationship really to the subject evolved a great deal over the time of the filmmaking.
Absolutely.
And you founded DK Filmworks a number of years ago, and you had a specific goal that you've articulated in your statements of changing the perception of African Americans in cinema. Can you talk a bit about the Runaways apropos of that?
Sure. And so there's a lot of layers to the creation of the Runaways. But one of the things I wanted to do, and this is how the Runaways came to its final form, it evolved. And ultimately, the female character is the heroine. She's the main character. She's the one, the action kind of evolves around her. And that was important because in the process of making it, you know, I realized there was a trope here where you had the boy looking to defend the girl. And this kind of fell into the narrative I was trying to change already amongst how African Americans were perceived. And so I was like, you know, why not have the young teenage girl be the heroine, the one taking action? Because in so many of the stories, it's the young girl who's running away. You know, she usually there's usually not all times, but a lot of times it's a woman who's a victim. And if the mother is being victimized, 9 times out of 10, the young girl runs away. And one of the things I changed for the story, because ultimately it kind of got away, but 8 times out of 10, when the girl runs away, she runs into the arms of an abuser. So that's one thing that I definitely altered. But then you had the boy who was aging out of a group home. And that's something we don't talk about. The massive issues we have with children who are taken care of by the state and the lack of resources. And so I knew loosely about a resource in DC that would provide a start for certain kids who qualified and aged out of a group home where they'd set them up. It's not as literal as it is in the film, but the idea is they help them get on your feet, because in most states, in most cities, once you're 18, you're out the door and that's it.
Yeah, that was a really interesting aspect to the film, was that you really felt like this couple were really equals and going on this journey together. And, you know, the ending of the film is really quite beautiful, with Kellee, the main character, saying, okay, you know, now what's next? What do we do now? Like, suddenly there's this freedom to create an opening for what life can become.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny, I wrote 3 endings. That one was before something. It was the best one because I thought all the other ones were a little bit on the bleak side. And so, and even in the written story and what we filmed, there's more dialogue after she asks that question. And ultimately, I decided to cut it before he answers. It's like a frame before he starts to answer.
It was
and
good.
I was like, let's just cut it
Very
here.
effective. Yeah, a great ending. So Julia, you know, I'm thinking, you know, so this woman is now facing freedom in her life. And then Julia, freedom plays a big role in Alex's biggest race, but in a really different way. It's someone deciding not to be enslaved by a difficult diagnosis, finding freedom within a cancer diagnosis. Could you tell us, you know, how you met Alex, what your background is together, and what it was like to be doing the film under these circumstances?
Sure, yeah. So Alex is my older brother's best friend. And the 4 of those guys on the relay all swam both in high school. And they were called the Fab Four because they came in freshman year to BCC High School, which is where I went as well, but we didn't overlap. I was a little bit younger. But they came in and they each had their own specialty and with their different strokes, and just from freshman to senior year, they kind of carried this medley relay, and they had all these records. And so I knew of Alex both through kind of this legend of like, they had all these records, they were in all the local papers. And then I joined the swim team years later, and that record that my brother and his 3 friends had still stood. And that was still something people talked about on the swim team. So there was sort of this like little bit of a legend around the Fab Four. So there was kind of that cool factor. But then also we all ended up swimming in summer swim leagues together on different teams. And so I kind of remember them as like joking around with my brother. My dad once called me Pookie in a swim meet, and my brother thought it was hilarious. And so every time I swam from then on out, like Alex and Rafi, they were like, oh, Pookie, you know. So I kind of remember them as like ribbing and making fun of me a little in a totally loving way, cheering me on.
Can we call you Pookie?
I don't know why I brought that up here. It's very odd. Yeah, so that's how he called me Pookie. That's how I know Alex. So, but I met them, through my brother, and so I was always just kind of Rich's little sister. And then when he told me about this story, I asked Rich, "Do you think Alex would be into this?" And he said, "You know, he's very into documenting his life right now, and I'm sure he would be." And you can see if you see the film, he's sort of a performer. He's very charismatic, and so
and there are moments where he's documenting his life. He's got his cell phone. He's giving, you know, a daily diary.
Exactly
how he's feeling now. So,
exactly.
How do you feel like his positive energy is really a standout? You know, it's amazing. How do you feel like that affected your filmmaking style?
Wow, that's a great question. I feel like it's so. Not trite, but it's kind of common to say, oh, you know, cancer survivor, so positive. But Alex has always been this way, and that's exactly how he is. And he refused, like, I remember I asked him, how do you stay positive in the light of this, you know, horrible diagnosis? And I think he said in the film, he's literally like, I just feel like there's no point in wasting energy on being negative, so I don't. And wow. It really is that simple. And you're absolutely right that to tell Alex's story, the film itself had to be hopeful and positive. And so, you know, we do cover the diagnosis and his, you know, trouble with getting treatment and just try to show the chaos of what that felt like. But ultimately it had to end on a positive note, and it's all about hope because that's what he's doing. That's the that's what he puts out into the world. That's why he's swimming. Swimming is what makes him feel alive. And he continues to put these swim meets on the calendar in the future to have this hope. And so it felt like there was no other choice based on the interview, answers he gave me and just based on who he is than to tell this as a positive and hopeful story.
You have a lot of experience filmmaking already through the Pew Charitable Trust, your work there, but this is your first independent project. Were there any unexpected challenges in the project?
There were a lot. I'm used to I'm very lucky. I was used to having a team of experts behind me. I would do the producing side and maybe edit the string out, but I have talented editors and cameramen and the resourcing of Pew. And so it was very intimidating. And I think honestly, at the risk of sounding cheesy, probably the biggest challenge was just believing in myself that I could pull this off on my own. That was a huge thing. I'd never crowdfunded before, which ended up being successful. But I mean, I just hate asking people for things and asking for money. And so it just felt like gut wrenching. And then I think there's just immense pressure. I feel this way in my stories at Pew as well. But when you're telling a story, especially about someone's personal health, there's just, you're walking in and you're asking someone to share the worst day of their lives with you, and they're trusting you to tell that story. And so just dealing with both, it's an honor and it's a burden. And so honestly, just dealing with the emotional burden of, am I telling the story, fairly? And am I portraying Alex in a way that he wants to be portrayed? And, all of that when it's personal. I think those were some of the challenges. And honestly, I'm not as technically savvy with shooting, and luckily I did hire some freelancers to help, but like even just navigating how lenses fog up in an indoor pool in Florida in August, and how you actually need to have them sit in that atmosphere for like an hour before you start shooting, were things that, like, as a producer, not dealing with the equipment as much, things I did not factor in.
That would be hard to predict, unless you were in that environment all the time. Is Alex still swimming as part of his treatment?
He is, yes. Swimming is definitely the thing that kind of keeps him, that makes him feel alive and gives him hope. And he finds it to be very helpful as he progresses with his treatment, both from a physical standpoint and also just to have something to look forward to. So he's put another swim meet on the calendar, I think next November with his friends, just to have something else to strive for.
Well, you have created an opportunity for all of us to be inspired by him, and we certainly wish him well. Turning to Provence, Mark, can you, I know that you have this fantastic background as a portrait photographer, and your portraits are quite unique. I really enjoyed looking at them. Each one pulls out something very particular to your film subject and puts a twist on standard portraiture. So I'm wondering how your portraiture influenced how you chose to shoot this film.
Yeah, I'm a stills photographer at heart. I started in stills, and that's where I learned, and I moved into cinematography maybe a little bit later than some other people who started in cinema. But I see a lot of similarities between my portraiture and shooting landscapes like I did in Light and Provence. My portraits are very environmental, where I hardly ever have close-ups. My portraits always zoom very far out, where you can really see the environment that the person is in. And I typically, a typical composition of my portraiture is to have this person sort of dead smack in the center with a lot of space around them. And so I think that in my environmental portraits, where the person is just as important as the person themselves. And so I think that really translates to the landscape images, where I'm trying to show a sense of place and try and show a sense of, trying to give a sense of what it feels like to be in that location. So I think that I see a lot of similarities. Funnily enough, actually, so I think Julie and I had the same problem, but opposite, where I'm very much in the cinematography and the tech side and the camera department, but I'm used to working with producers and directors. This was my first time sort of having to work on the producing and directing side as well as the shooting side. So I was very comfortable shooting, but then when it came to sitting down with the subjects and making, doing all the magical work that producers do, working with subjects and what the work that directors do, that's where I had issues.
So did you have some unexpected surprises?
Yeah, I had. Well, yes, I did, especially because I made it. very, very hard for myself because I don't speak much French at all. So I was working with a producer, Pascal, who's amazing, a French journalist. He helped me translate. He helped me talk to subjects. But so I not speaking the language of my subjects was especially challenging, and on the editing side as well, editing interviews not in a language that I have a lot of expertise in outside of how to order coffee.
You never would have known that from the film. It was so smooth. It looked like you must be a native speaker yourself.
Thank you.
So you and I spoke a while ago. We were talking about your film and about why many people remain removed from the reality of climate change. And I'm wondering if you could talk briefly about your feelings about that.
Yeah, this is something that I thought about a lot while I was in the period of time while I was thinking that this project was a good idea and before actually deciding that I was going to go make it. There's so much media around climate change, so much journalism, so much reporting, so much documentary, but people still remain so avoidant around the issue. And I think it's inherent of a issue with documentary as a medium, and I love documentary. But I think one issue is that, and it sounds so obvious, but people don't like to feel bad. When people feel sad, or feel bad with real world issues, I feel like people can put up those barriers and those defenses. And especially with the overwhelming and apocalyptic rhetoric around climate change, so much of it is so terrifying and so overwhelming. So one thing that I tried to do with this film was to try and create a film that's less apocalyptic and more emotive and culturally driven, something that's like a little bit of a softer touch on climate change, trying to tap into different feelings than the sort of overwhelming fear that so much of modern climate reporting tries to get people.
You tap into, in both cases, you're dealing with a subject, well, in the case of climate change, the subject is immensely bigger than we can really take in. But also in the case of the physical beauty of Provence and its relationship to this artwork, that is a sublime experience that is much bigger than us.
Yeah.
But one that we can attach to somehow.
Yeah. And I think that opening up with those sort of romantic feelings and those feelings that might be nostalgic for people gives people the emotional vulnerability to be able to connect with the climate change element at the back half of the film. And something that came in a lot during the editing process, where people often tried to gave me the note to move a lot of the climate stuff earlier in the piece and like sort of open with more of the climate stuff. And I see why people were giving that note. It's not a criticism, but I liked having it more at the end when you already were emotionally vulnerable to what I was talking about, and then slowly introduce those subjects.
I have one quick final question for you about sound. So I really noticed that the trees speak in your film. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering if you could just talk about your choice of really bringing out that sound of the rustling leaves.
Yeah,
it's really beautiful.
So again, I was a one-man crew on this whole thing. Other than, I like to give a second shout out to my producer Pascal, who's amazing. But I was a one-man crew on all the production side, so. One thing, I knew that the trees and the wind were going to be a big part of it. So I spent a lot of time holding up an audio recorder to trees, standing there like by myself in the field. And I just like stand there for like, 2 minutes at a time. So I'm sure a lot of people thought I was like super weird standing around with the audio recorder.
It's really effective. I mean, it is the sound of the light. That's kind of how it was for me.
Thank you. Yeah. To me, it's a film about light, trees, and wind. So I knew I had to get all of those things really present in the the video.
Nicely done.
Thank you.
These interviews go by way too quickly, and we're nearing the end of our time together. I wanted to, as a closing question, ask each of you, since it's our MetroShorts program, if you could tell us something brief about your experience as a member of the Washington, D.C. arts community. And why don't we begin with Dewey?
Sure, yeah. Oh, Dewey, sorry.
We'll go with Dewey first, and then we'll come to you.
I'll tell you this, and this is something I always talk about. Coming from where I come from, Ohio, and coming to DC, I feel like the city of Washington DC and the arts community in DC support the artists and not just the arts, and that is something I'm very, very grateful for, and very appreciative. Every one of my projects has been funded in some part by the DC arts community. And so it's from someone who moved here, it's a wonderful thing how strong the community comes together around projects. It's just a wonderful, wonderful experience.
And Julia, tell us about your experience.
Sure, I think DC sometimes gets a bad rap as a swamp, or all government employees and soulless or something like that. And not that any of that's bad. I love most of my family are government employees, but I think that it's underestimated what a vibrant arts community that we have, and it's not something I even realized until probably the last few years. I joined Women in Film group, and they were the fiscal sponsors for Alex's Biggest Race and Video Consortium, and I was just blown away at how many people were out there telling important stories, local stories. So yeah, we have a much more vibrant arts scene than I think we sometimes get credit for.
Those are wonderful organizations too. Any filmmakers out there in the DC area should know about those. Mark, tell us about this from your perspective. Yeah,
seconded. I mean, from what Julia said, I just think that DC is one of the great arts and culture cities in America, and it is never included on one of those on a list of great arts and culture cities. And I have theories on why that I'm not sure now this is a time or place to get into, but systemic racism. But anyway, that's why. But yeah, that's what I have to say about that.
Thank you. That's really important, and good information from all of you. And we are thrilled to be a part of the DC arts community and share this local work. On behalf of Filmfest DC, I want to thank you all for being with us, and thank you once again for sharing your films with us this year and with our DC audience. And to our viewers, thank you for watching, and don't miss the opportunity to watch our other MetroShorts interview with filmmakers Sam Hampton, Mohammed Safouri, Catherine Murphy, and editor Emmett Williams. Thank you and goodbye.